Hey, it is Xennial Gamer, and today we're going to be talking about Giants B10. And I know how bad the timing is to be doing a GB10 video the day after they announce B12 dungeons are coming out, right? But here's the deal. I spent quite a bit of time and resources prepping for this video last week, and the rumor has it that B12 is going to be exactly the same as B10 in terms of difficulty. And as you can see, the 22-second team, this team is super consistent. It's actually one of the best teams, probably the best team I think I've ever built. The worst run I've ever seen out of this team was 28 seconds. It has never failed. I've done more than 2,000 runs. It overall average is probably right around 23 seconds. It's consistent 21 to 24 seconds with the occasional derp. And again, I know GB10, bad timing. But assuming that GB12 is going to be the same as GB10, this is definitely a team that is worth discussing now so that people can prepare for it. As soon as B12 is out, you'd be able to transition over to this team and get the improved farming rates. Or if B12 winds up being much more difficult, then this may be a video that would help some people that are unable to do B12. Now, this video is going to be broken down into 3 teams, just like I did with the Dragons B10. The first team is the one you see right here. This is definitely end game runes. Most people are not going to be able to build this exact team, but I am going to do a kind of late mid-game team after this that should be attainable to a lot of people right now, and probably just about every mid-game and beyond in 2 months after this B12 comes out. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some options that you can use if you're in the earlier stages of the game. Now, no, we're not going to do early game teams. I should say I'm going to talk about some teams you could use if you're in the earlier stages of mid-game and you're missing, or you're missing some of these monsters and can't build the first 2 teams. I don't have a lot of those monsters ruined, so I can't demo those teams, but I will talk about the theorycraft behind them, the speed tuning, and just kind of give you some options. So with that said, we'll take a look. If you want to take a look at the team that's running in the background behind me, let me just talk about how this team works and why it's so consistent, and then we're going to go ahead and look at the runes. Now, to start off with, the single biggest key to Giants, B10, B12, whatever, to Giants, is going to be defense breaking the mid-boss. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. We're talking about mid-boss, not end-boss. But with all of these teams that are built like this, intended for perfect AI, and that includes the Luna teams, and I don't have Luna, so that's why I have to go for teams that don't involve Luna. And I know this is a sidetrack, but honestly, I actually think this team is more consistent than the Luna team, and that ties back to the mid-boss thing. So since we're trying to get perfect AI, or as close to perfect AI as we can, the goal here is to get the Giants, to get the mid-boss defense broken so that all of my monsters do exactly what they're supposed to do in the order that they're supposed to do it. And that's going to allow me to clear both waves and the mid-boss with every cooldown exactly where I want it going into the end boss. Now, if I were to miss the defense break on the mid-boss, one of 2 things could happen. My monsters take some extra turns and the cooldowns get out of whack, or the turn sequence gets out of whack. Or worse, the boss attacks my Julie, she drops below max HP, and then she's no longer guaranteed to use her skill 3 on the next wave. So, to counteract that, we're using Sophia. Sophia and Lauren are the 2 most reliable defense breakers for the mid-boss in the game. Now, Sophia will defense break the mid-boss the vast majority of the time, but when you're running a team like the Luna teams, a lot of times I think the current Luna teams involve Abigail, who acts as a backup defense breaker. Her animation's a little bit slower, and she's not 100% to hit the defense break on the mid-boss either because she can derp. So in this case, what we're actually running is Sabrina Talia. We're taking advantage of the Talia leader skill to allow us to put more damage on our Julie and run a 76 crit rate. And by having the Sophia go first and the Sabrina go second, we've got 2 chances to defense break the mid-boss. Between those 2, we should just about always defense break it. And then if somehow they continue to derp, we actually get a 3rd chance to defense break when the Talia goes because the Sabrina will act first. So you can see how it works in the background. Basically, Julie clears the first wave, and then we defense break and clear the mid-boss. In an ideal run, we clear the mid-boss with Lynn. Worst case scenario, we clear it with Talia. Then we get to the final boss, and it's pretty much the same sequence where we get our defense break with Sophia. We get some damage from the Sabrina and the Lynn. Usually, we're going to bring the mid-boss down low enough to actually trigger the Talia Perfect AI I think I said mid-boss there, I meant final boss. Usually we're going to bring the final boss down below 30%, which is what triggers the Talia Perfect AI to clear him. If Lin derps, or if we don't get a defense break early enough, then maybe the boss goes to 50%. That could lead to a Talia derp. That's when we get the 27, 28 second runs. And again, that's about as bad as this team ever gets. Okay, so as with most PvE content, although one of the new dungeons coming in is going to change this, speed is largely not important in this dungeon. All you need is for your slowest monster to have 140 combat speed in Giants B10. That is your speed after speed tower. Now, for speed tuning purposes, we want our Julie to go first. So my Julie is at 142. It means she has a combat speed of 158. Very important, the Julie third skill must be maxed in order for this team to work. The first two do not have to, but the third one must be. Now, my Julie has the bare minimum damage to one-shot the waves and giants right now. And I will show you in the optimizer after we go through the runes how you calculate if your Julie is going to have enough damage to one-shot the waves. So Julie goes first, the Sophia goes second. Now Sophia also must have her third skill maxed. It's unfortunate, but it is just the case. Both Sophia and Julie must have their skill 3s maxed. You can see my Sophia's in triple fight. Now, it is essential that your Sophia has 85% accuracy or higher. Now, remember, 85% is really the effective cap on accuracy because you can't take an enemy monster below 15% resistance. The mid-boss has 100 resistance, so if we have 85 accuracy, we take him down to the lowest possible level. You want to, after you give her 85 accuracy, just give her as much damage as you can. Remember, she actually only needs 61 crit rate. In this case, just because my fight runes were kind of limited, she wound up on a crit rate rune. That's why mine is so high. A much better build here would have actually been 61 crit rate with a ton of crit damage, and obviously the attack is low as well. So my Sophia, she's not doing a lot of damage. The team still works great, but if you can get your Sophia to do more damage than mine, that's going to help you out as well. Now, after the Sophia goes is going to be the Sabrina. You'll notice that my Sabrina has the exact same speed as my Sophia, and at that point, the placement order of these monsters matters. Because they're the same speed, if I were to do this, Sabrina would act before Sophia. By doing this, Sophia acts first. So my my Sabrina, she is also in triple fight, 73 crit rate. Now, she is actually below max crit rate for this dungeon. I'm just waiting to drop a crit gem, actually. So she's at 97 crit rate with the Talia lead. As soon as I drop a crit gem, I'll get that fixed. Obviously, good attack and crit damage. The accuracy also, ideally, she would have 85 accuracy, but you can only put so many stats on these monsters, especially when you're going triple fight, and it's really hard to get a lot of stats on them. So if you're going to focus accuracy on one monster or the other, obviously Sophia is the essential one to have max accuracy. Just get as much accuracy on your Sabrina as you can after that. Now, after Sabrina goes, the next one to go is the Lin. Now, my Lin is in Rage Blade. You can see 260 crit damage. The crit rate at 80 means she is at 100% crit rate because we're using that Talia leader skill. And then the Talia, again, in triple fight, she would also only need 76 because we're using her own self-leader skill. For the Talia, you're just going to put as much damage into it as you can. Now, I did warn you guys, these are late-game runes, so, we've got 3 triple fight sets in here. I've got another fight set on the Julie, and again, I'm at the lowest, basically rock bottom lowest level of damage I can do to one-shot the Giants B10 waves. So, as I said, after this, we're going to discuss another team if you can't one-shot those waves. Now, as you've seen the overall runes, again, I can't really tell you, I haven't tested for bottom damage on the Sabrina, the Sophia, or Talia, but you can see that, if these were not triple fight sets, these would not be crazy OP runes. Pretty good attack subs on the Talia, but 183 crit damage. If my Talia was in Rage, she'd obviously be well over 200. But the point I was making here is, if you're able to build an even fatter Julie than mine, if you're able to get 2200 attack and 260 crit damage, or, if you don't need as many fight sets and you drop that Talia into a Rage set, for example, you're going to wind up getting a lot more damage out of them, and then it's even easier to rune those monsters. But if you do have to get them into fight runes, you've seen my stats, you'd be able to compare. I can tell you that my team clears every single time. So that would be, at the minimum, you would only have to match my stats. You might even be able to go lower than that. You probably could go somewhat lower than that on several of these monsters. And then I think most people are able to Most people who are able to build this type of team would also be able to pretty much match this kind of Lyn, especially because she's in Rageblade. Okay, so on screen, we've got the optimizer, and let's take a look at how you would build your Fat Julie. So to start off with, we know we're going to want her in Rage. Now, mine happens to be in Rage Fight, but you may want to just do kind of a general search in Rage plus any offset. You're definitely going to need attack, crit damage, attack. It's up to you if you want to search for broken sets or not. I will tell you that when you check no broken sets, the optimizer returns results much faster, which allows you to use a much higher search depth. But it just depends on, what your rune depth is. You may also want to just guide it and say that you want to do Rage Blade or something to that effect. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and load up Rage Fight because I know I was trying to get as many fight sets as I could. Because ultimately I was also trying to build a team that could one-shot Necro B10, which I can do with exactly 13 fight sets. Every single set has to be a fight set. So we're going to go ahead and use locked runes. We're going to click the plus 15 down here. We're going to set our crit rate to a minimum of 76. And then we're going to set our speed to a minimum of 127. Now here's why. 140 is the minimum combat speed. Julie needs to go first. And so our Talia is actually going to be in the leader skill slot. So if we make Talia 125 and everybody else 126, then Julie has to be 127. You could actually get away with Julie at 126, I think, as long as the Talia is 125. So I guess we can go ahead and put Julie at 126, and that would allow us to speed tune everything. Just remember that the tighter the speed tuning it is, the harder it is to rune all of the other monsters. So if you can get a little bit of a faster build and get some breathing room, it really does help. Now for our focus, we're going to go with HP, attack, crit rate, crit damage, and accuracy. Now why accuracy? Because if you build a Fat Julie, you're going to use her in DB10 as well, and the accuracy does help a little bit to strip the immunity off of the boss over there. Now we're going to come over here, we're going to click on settings. We are going to pick our 1,000 shots and we're going to change it to 720% attack on the multiplier. Now the reason we do that is because Julie's hitting 6 times, and so this just shows us the total damage of all 6 cards. Now for the dungeon preset, we're going to go ahead and click Giants B10 boss. We're going to click Kairos dungeon. And we're going to change the enemy defense to 1301. We're going to click on maximum skill ups, and then we're going to make sure that crit right here is clicked. We are not worried about the leader skill right here. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. You can stop the calculation right there. Then we're going to go ahead and just drop in however many fight sets we're using. Now in my case, I'm using 10 fight sets, which is 3 each on Sabrina, Sophia, and Talia, and then 1 on the Julie. However, the 1 on the Julie, the optimizer is actually already calculating into the build, so we're only going to put 9 fight sets here. This is basically how many additional fight sets are you using, not on Julie. Then I'll go ahead and hit optimize. Now you can see my damage here is 19,548. And again, I'm basically scraping rock bottom minimum damage. You might be able to do a little bit lower than this, but not much. I mean, like we're talking a couple 100 points at most. So you could test if you can't get quite all the way there. If you're looking at like a 19,300 build, you could go ahead and test that. I can't tell you to the number exactly where it is. But what I can tell you is the way the Giants waves work is that after those golems drop below 50% HP, they get reduced damage. So they have 1,301 defense. They actually only have just under 15,000 HP. It's 14,955. But because they're taking a damage reduction on the final 2 or 3 hits, you do need to be able to do more total damage. Now here's the thing, because there is a slight variance in the amount of damage each hit does, if your first hits are low, then your 4th hit is actually going to be at full power. But if your first hits are high, then your 4th hit is going to be at that reduced damage level. So when you're testing, you may clear the wave one time and not clear it the next time, and that's just that little bit of randomness in the total damage output. So again, what you're looking for is total damage right here of around 19,548. Now, I mentioned that we would talk about and I called this in the Dragons B10 video, I called her a heavy Julie. So we're going to talk about one more option now, which is the heavy Julie. For the heavy Julie, what you're going to be doing is bringing the monsters below 30% health on the waves, and that will trigger like a perfect AI occurrence where Lucian will then follow the Julie and go ahead and clear the wave. So in this case, all you would actually need to do is 70% of that 19,548 damage, or we'll just round it off and say about 13,700. So you follow all the exact same configuration options I just showed you, but now we're targeting 13,700 instead of 19,500. Now, along those lines, you're going to need far, far fewer fight sets. You probably, depending on your stage of game, you may not need any fight sets. And especially because we only need 76 crit rate since we're using that Talia lead. So the 13,700 damage with only needing 76 crit rate, a lot of players in mid-game and beyond are going to be able to reach that level. And then your Lucian basically doesn't need any damage at all. He's got to be able to do just enough damage to clear the waves from under 30%. We're talking about like 2k cards. I mean, I think he can do that almost unruined. So you could easily put your Lucian into a triple fight set. Remember that Lucian's not going to do much damage on the boss wave, on the bosses themselves either, because there's not going to be any defense break ahead of him. So this is what your team would look like using the overweight Julie. So basically, your Julie is going to continue to go first, but now your Lucian goes second. He's going to clear the waves. On the mid-boss, your Sophia is going to do the defense break, followed by the Sabrina and the Talia. So you're going to want to re-emphasize damage on the Sophia. You're going to want her damage much higher. You're going to need your Sabrina and your Talia to be in the strongest builds you can put out. I would either go with some sort of violent offset, violent fight, or violent blade, or even better, rage, especially for the Talia. The Talia you really want in rage. For the Sabrina, you could go with either violent or rage, depending on how much overall damage you're able to put out. Now, this team we're looking at right now will have a best speed of somewhere in the mid to low 20-second range, but it is going to have a wider range of times because if the Sophia doesn't land defense break, you're not going to clear mid-boss. That could cause some derps on the third wave. And then on the final boss, again, if you don't land the defense break early, you may not clear it, or you just may not have enough overall damage to clear the boss using this particular combination. Now, the alternative to that is to go ahead and drop the Water Twins, take the Lucian lead, and then bring in a couple of nukers. Now, what I used when I used this team was actually a Crow and a Lyn, but you're going to note that this does mean that you actually have to get 100% crit rate on your Julie because you're no longer using the Talia leader skill. So it's a different kind of build, but it's still something that should be very attainable. If you're going for 100% crit rate, but you're going for 30% less damage than the Fat Julie, again, you can work in some fight sets. Your Lucian in this team still does not really need to do any significant damage whatsoever. You could put him on triple fight. You could use almost any runes and he'll still be able to do enough. It's literally like 2,200 damage or less than that, 1,800 damage cards that he needs to do in order to clear the waves. So from there, in this case, what we're looking at is the Julie going first, the Lucian going second, the Sophia going third, the Crow going fourth, and the Lyn going last. Now, I ran this team for a very long time. This team averaged about 26 seconds overall, so it's only about 4 seconds slower than the Fat Julie team. Now, if you don't have or you can't build the Pierrettes, there are some other options that you can use as well. So the team that I used before this one was actually Lucian, Galleon, Water Homunculus, Crow, and Lyn. Now, I know this one seems a little bit weird, and I will tell you it's got a lot of derp potential. You know, we're going backwards through the different teams that I've built over time into ones that are going to be slightly slower. But here's how this one works. Basically, the Lucian goes first, and as long as he doesn't derp, his amp is going to clear the wave. You need 5,500 damage cards or 6k cards, somewhere around there to clear the wave. So as long as the Lucian is doing 6k cards, which is very, very easy to get to, and he only needs 85 crit rate because he's got attribute advantage, he's going to clear the first wave. Now on the second wave, Lucian will hit the mid-boss, doesn't really do much. The Galleon is ideally going to do time to loot, which will give me an attack buff and defense break the mid-boss. Then the Water Homunculus goes, does a bunch of damage, and then Crow, and then Lyn finishes off the boss. Now why Water Homunculus? Obviously he's not a big nuker for the mid-boss. Here's why. He served as a little bit of derp protection for me, so if the Galleon derps on the wave, then, if the Lucian derps on the wave, then the Galleon will go with his time to loot, and the Water Homunculus will go ahead and clear that wave. So it was just some additional derp protection for me. Now you could accomplish the same thing kind of by using double Lucians, but here's the difference. Water Homunculus is AoE on all 3 skills. So the idea here is that we've got 2 monsters going before Water Homunculus. The Lucian could clear the wave with an amp, and the Galleon could defense break the wave with a time to loot. And if one or the other of those things happens, we're going to advance by the time we reach the Water Homunculus, so it really sped me up through the waves. Now, the other option here would be to simply go with double Lucians, which is, again, working backwards on teams that I've used in the past. In this case, we went double Lucian, Galleon, Crow, and Lyn. I have also done this team with double Lucian, Crow, and Naomi. Now, I will tell you that Naomi's damage is actually a little bit lower. It's actually a lot lower than you would really expect, considering her skill, which is the fact that she's going to increase damage by 20% for each harmful effect on the enemy. But the nice thing is that you can rune her with just about no crit rate, and and just give her a ton of attack and crit damage. The risk to that is that if you get resisted by everything on the mid-boss, she does just about no damage. So this team gives you, where this team really shines is that you've got 3 wind monsters for the boss to glance on, so it's almost never going to fail. But it is going to derp a lot and run a lot of slow runs because you're counting on the Lucians who have poor AI. You're counting on Galleon to defense break, and he's Galleon, right? And then you're counting on, if Galleon doesn't break, your Naomi's kind of a dead pick. Now, another option that you can use in place of this would be the double Lucian with the Water Twins. Or if you happen to have 2 Talias, you could also do something like Lucian, Galleon, Sabrina, double Talia. And you'll notice that there's a theme in pretty much all of these. Basically, in every single case, what we're doing is trying to get a big AoE attack to clear the wave. Then we need a defense break followed by big single target damage to clear the mid-boss. Then we need to cycle the cooldown back to that big AoE attack to clear the second wave. And then once again, we need that defense break followed by big single damage nuking to the mid-boss. So if you don't have Talia, if you don't have Lyn, then all you're doing is looking for single damage, heavy damage scaling nukers in their place. So that's where the Crows or the Naomis or Sigmarus or any other monster that's going to do big damage that scales based on negative effects to the enemy boss, or just has huge multipliers, or does damage based on the enemy's max HP. All of those will work to serve the role of the single target heavy damage nukers. Now for your AoEs, obviously Lucian is going to be the best. Well, actually Julia is going to be the best if you can rune her, followed by the Lucian. If you can't rune the Julie, and for some reason you don't have Lucian, even though we just had a Nat 4 event, then you can actually use something like the Galleon and the Water Homunculus to go ahead and set up and clear those waves. Okay guys, so that's going to be it for this GB10 video. Once again, it's my hope that this team will continue to work in B12. Actually, I'm not sure if I hope that or not, because I'm looking forward to a new challenge, but I'm putting out the video because if this team does work in B12, then we're going to just change the thumbnail and call this a GB12 video, right? And if it doesn't, in the meantime, this gives you some sort of team to work towards and kind of prepare for the new update as it's coming out. So, as always, hope you found it useful, hope you found it enjoyable, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, if you're still with me to this point, then that means that you probably liked the video, found it entertaining, or even better, both. So please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment down below, because those things help the channel grow, and more importantly, they show me that the video is useful, and that's the whole reason I do this in the first place.